All right, good morning, dear friends, and welcome to the main object big book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David. Good to see you all. And for the first order of business, I have asked our friend Donna M. to read the AA preamble. And let's see, hold on a second. Let me move that over. Okay, you know what, I'm going to try this again. Let me try this again. Okay, and there we go. Donna,
Yeah,
do you see that?
I do. Thank you, David. My name is Donna. I'm an alcoholic. AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Donna, thank you so much. And now I'm going to ask everybody to join me in inviting God into this meeting this morning by joining in on the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. We are a line by line big book study meeting, so which means we go very slowly through the book. And what we do is, and we've talked about before, is we break the text down into certain categories, 5 categories, in order to. I'll put those up on the screen, and they'll be in the chat too. So don't worry if you don't get them this go around. But we break them down into questions, directions and explanations, promises, warnings, and history. And those colors are the highlighter colors I use in particular. You can use whatever works for you, but what that does is it helps me understand the text, grasp it, and and also, more importantly, it helps me when I get to that point where I need to share this text with other alcoholics. And so, as we go through the text today, pages 33, I think, through 35, what we'll do is I'll highlight what I think anyway a particular passage is, which category it falls into, and then in addition, just a couple of housekeeping announcements. The format is that I will share until about 7 o'clock, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments, discussion, so forth. And then, just so everybody knows also, we're recording this meeting so that it can be put up on our YouTube archive, and those links will be posted in the chat. And just also be aware that only my part is recorded, so if anybody is wary about having their shares recorded, that stuff's not part of what we do here. And so, with that, what I want to do is I want to give a little recap of where we've been, where we're going today. And again, we're in More About Alcoholism, page 33 through, we're going to hopefully head over to page 35. And just in summary, what we've seen is that throughout this chapter, Bill really maintains a pretty consistent focus on the first step, with a particular emphasis on showing us how our powerlessness will always lead us to return to drinking. And in particular, what he's really focusing on here is a lot of, I guess we could call it ego deflation. And in today's reading in particular, Bill really gets to the heart of that ego deflation, um, and focuses on perhaps the most crucial aspect of our powerlessness, and that is um, what he calls the peculiar mental twist. And I think this is when I understood the importance of this mental twist. Um, I really saw that this gets to the heart of my drinking and why I kept drinking despite the knowledge that drinking was a problem for me. And we'll talk a little bit about that in particular. He makes a clear case throughout the reading today that through the twist, alcoholics are driven to distort logic. He calls it a mental twist, but it's really how we take logic and we distort it for one specific purpose, and that is avoiding complete spiritual surrender. And I can speak from experience when I can say it is just as easy to do that mental twist sitting in an AA meeting as it is sitting on a bar stool. And that's why I think it's. I hope that one of the results of talking about it today is that, in general, we'll talk about it more often, because I don't think that this mental twist gets talked about enough. Because I think, again, it gets to the heart of what we're talking about here. So again, I'm on page 33, and I'm on the second full paragraph, which starts young people. Now, just so for category purposes, I have the entire rest of 33. That means the second paragraph into the third. The rest of the page for me, just to make it easy, I have that highlighted in pink as a warning, because what Bill's really emphasizing here is he's getting to the heart of our disease and how that disease manifests for us. And so it starts out, young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop, as he did, on their own willpower. Now, what's he talking about there? If you weren't here the last time, he's talking about, if we'll remember, he's talking about the quote-unquote extraordinary gentleman of who stopped drinking early on, and then had a successful career, and then at 55 retired and took out his carpet slippers and was, as we see in the text, was dead within 4 years. So what he's saying is that if you read that and you're a young person, you may be encouraged by this man's experience to think they can stop, as he did, on their own willpower, because this man stopped on his own willpower for about 30 years. So I just want to say a couple things here, because when I read that, what jumped out at me were several things. Is that only, is it just me, or only an alcoholic would hear a story about someone dying with alcoholism within 4 years and be encouraged? Because think about it. The guy starts drinking, he's dead within 4 years. But when I was drinking, especially because I was 24 when I came in, I would say, well, there is a silver lining here. And it gets to, he's already setting, seriously, what he's doing is he's already setting up the argument for this peculiar mental twist. The other thing is, what I'm going to say is, while he's saying young people, what I realize he's really pointing out is not just young people, but anybody who reads this story about the man who dies after 4 years, or any other story in the book, and comes away thinking that their experience differs in a way that they believe they still have either the skills, capacity, insight, intelligence, wherewithal that doesn't require them to take the kind of spiritual surrender AA is talking about. And I think when I see it that way, that really gets to the heart of the mental twist for me. And so, moving on, we doubt if many of them can do it. And that means stop on their own willpower. Because none of them will really want to stop. And hardly one of them, because of here it goes, and this is the highlight of our reading today, the peculiar mental twist. Because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find he can win out. And when we say win out, know that we also mean win out over the long term. Because what I will do, or what I've done in my drinking, is I've looked at a particular instance, like whatever, a particular 6-week period, maybe when I kept my drinking under control. And even though many disasters followed after that, I would use that 6-week period as evidence as to why I didn't need to completely surrender. I hope that makes sense to people. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years. And what I want to do is touch base here again because, and I'll post a link to this a little later on, but previously, I think it was 2 weeks ago when we met, I talked about the kind of spiral design of, and I put it up on the screen, and this sort of unlocks the logic Bill uses when he is talking about our disease, especially in the first 7 chapters of the big book, is that he keeps going through this cycle of 4 key topics or commitments that alcoholics need to experience in order to completely surrender to our process. And that is medical facts. And what he's talking about right now is he's talking about a combination of ego deflation and medical facts, leading into, as you can see there, it's not that there's not like a fixed order, but what he's doing is he's building a case for the spiritual design for living. And of course, it's assuming already a high resolve. So and it's not a fixed structure. It's sort of a loose, but it helps me loosely understand what he's doing here. So anyway, moving on. To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor take the quantity some of us have. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. Certain drinkers, who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics, are astonished at their inability to stop. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large number of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try to get them to see it. I think what he's doing here is he's not necessarily trying to single out young people or women. I think what he is trying to do is, again, it's all in service to illustrating how the mental twist works and how we separate ourselves, how the disease causes us to separate ourselves from the need for spiritual surrender. And so I can certainly, like I said, I was 24 when I got sober, so I can certainly relate to feeling like I was too young. I also thought I was too smart. I also thought I was too insightful, too self-aware. Maybe I was an alcoholic, but I wasn't the type of alcoholic you people were. And I didn't need the kind of obedience you people had to this sort of weird cultish God thing you had going on. So what he's doing is he's really trying in this paragraph, to knock down two broad types of mental twist: women and young people. And of course, today we could substitute a number of things. I mean, one of the things, and I don't want to get controversial here, but one of the things I see also is people who identify themselves more as drug addicts. Now, I'm not saying that drug addicts are wrong or bad people or whatever, but what I'm saying is anything that we construct in our mind that we use to justify not surrendering to a higher power through the 12 steps. So moving on. The next sentence I have, as a warning, and I'm on the top of page 34 now. As we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. And the next sentence I have in green as direction. If anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for a year. This direction is actually the second time Bill has proposed a quote-unquote test to determine if we're alcoholic. So here he's suggesting leave it alone for a year. But if we jump back for a second, just for a second, you can flip back in your book to page 31. At the bottom of page 31, he introduces the first test, where he says, we do not like to pronounce, I'm at the very bottom of the page, we do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself, step over to the nearest bar room, and try some controlled drinking. So what he's saying is, you can try drinking, you can try not drinking. Both are valid tests. And what he's trying to do is dispel our reservations. And then I'm back on 34 now. The rest of the paragraph I have in pink as a warning. If he is a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of success. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions. Some of them with only a few weeks, most of them, within a few weeks. I think there's a key underlying theme here that we also need to acknowledge, that I think sometimes trips us up. And I think what Bill is acknowledging is we're not going to save everybody. And not everyone with alcoholism wants to be saved. And so what he's focusing on, and we're going to get to that in the coming paragraphs here, what he's really focusing on is not so much convincing people they are alcoholic as what do we do when we really want to stop? When we really are ready and we've determined we have this thing and we are willing to undergo the kind of spiritual surrender necessary in order for permanent, contented, useful sobriety. What do we do then? And so moving on. The second full paragraph on page 34 that begins for those. The first two sentences I have in green for directions. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. Now he's shifting the focus. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. So let's think about it a second. Because how many times have some of us, myself included, gotten wrapped up in a particular sponsee who is either in the debating society or simply not willing. They'll yes you to death, but not when push comes to shove, when it comes to action, aren't taking the actions necessary in order to stay sober. And he doesn't say it here, but he says it elsewhere. Bill gives us very clear directions when engaging with those people. He says we double down on the anger and resentment and judgment and make them see it. No, he doesn't. I'm kidding. He doesn't say that. That's David's plan for convincing people. What he tells us is we wish them well. We seek to be helpful. But we move on. Okay. And here he really gets to the heart of the matter. So I'm on page, again, on 34. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. The rest of the paragraph I have in pink for a warning. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. The assumption underlying that is that if we've crossed that threshold, it is only through a spiritual awakening, a vital spiritual experience, that we will be able to live useful, contented, consistent sobriety. So many of us, and now what he gets into is he's established, okay, gang, it's only through spiritual surrender that we're going to do that. However, Now what he points out are, here are some of the substitutes that we will put in place in order to avoid spiritual surrender or justify not taking spiritual surrender. And these are just two substitutes. There are many. The first is, as he says here, many of us felt we had plenty of character. Think about it for a second. For those of you familiar with the book, when we talk about Jim the car salesman, Fred the accountant, and several other people, in each of those stories, Bill talks about how they have high moral character. So these people consider themselves very ethical, very moral, but they're unable to stay sober. And so his point is that high ethics, high morals, high standards are irrelevant. The next one, I think, is probably even more disheartening to me because I see this a lot. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever. And how many times have I sponsored somebody and they've said, because of how I suffered the last time, I will never go back to that. And what Bill is saying is that, and that is an example of that tremendous urge to cease forever. Yet we found it impossible. So high moral character, great motivation, terrific. On their own, they're not enough. They will not keep you sober. Yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it. This utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish. And I think sometimes we can do newcomers a disservice. And I'm not saying call somebody out in a meeting, and I'm not at all suggesting counterpunching somebody who shares that they, really are motivated this time. I'm not saying any of that. But what I'm saying is, for those people sponsoring those individuals or a trusted AA friend to pull them aside and say, listen, our book tells us something a little bit different. So then at the bottom of 34, it says, how then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? And that is a question, so I have that in orange. And then the rest of that paragraph onto the top of page 35 is in green for direction. The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. For obviously, this is the crux of the problem. It's the mental twist. And what I will suggest to you, and in reading and in preparing today, up till this morning, or in the last 24 hours, I really thought the mental twist was that aha moment that said to us, wow, drinking is a good thing. A drink will help right now. But what I've come to see, and what the book really highlights for me, is That's not the mental twist. The domino that I'm talking about is falling further back on the sequence. It's not aha, drinking is great. It's, you know, I really don't need to do that inventory, or just not yet. Or I'm not sober enough. Or I'm so messed up from drinking, I can't help anybody. I'm so broken and fragile from my last go about, I'm not ready to have a sponsor tell me what to do. That's the mental twist that precedes the inevitable fall into drinking again. Does that make sense, gang? It's the avoidance of the spiritual surrender, not the decision to pick up the drink. So, one last paragraph and we'll get underway. And the first part here is orange for a question. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? And then the next sentence is a warning in pink. Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree, which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy, are mystified as he walks directly into a saloon. I think why that's a warning is not to the person picking up a drink, but it's a warning responding to the person who is helping the person picking up a drink. To not be baffled. Like, yo, fellow alcoholics, don't be baffled by this because it's the heart of the disease. And then lastly, to close it out, why does he? Of what is he thinking? And we're going to stop there because we've hit time. And also, then it gets into our familiar story, which we'll cover next week, of our friend Jim, the car salesman. And we'll go in depth as Bill illustrates the mental twist. And with that, why don't we open up the meeting for comments, discussion, thoughts, so forth.